taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
Most of us blacks, or Negroes as he called us, really thought we were free without being aware that in our subconscious, all those chains we thought had been struck off were still there. And there were many ways where what really motivated us was our desire to be loved by the white man. Malcolm meant to lance that sense of inferiority. He knew it would be painful. He knew that people could kill you because of it, but he dared to take that risk.
He was saying something over and above that of any other leader of that day. While the other leaders were begging for entry into the house of their oppressor, he was telling you to build your own house.
Well, he represents the
people. State of New York versus. Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. I'm Graham Weatherspoon, your host for today. Winston is in the background handling the details in the technological field of electronics. Today we have with us three very special guests. Attorney Jeff Emden of Emden and Russell here in Manhattan, Ms. Constance Malcolm, and Mr. Frank Graham, the parents of Ramarley Graham. I want to thank you all for being here today. I'd like to go to you, Constance and Frank, first, and get a background picture on your son, Ramarley, in light of this case, and what you can tell us about him prior to this incident.
Ramarley was 18 years old, fun, loving, kind of shy in some way. You know, he loves to help people. Whatever he could help her, he would do it. It don't matter what it is. He loved his friends. He, you know, always be around them. And he's just a normal kid that, you know, a normal 18-year-old kid that would hang out with his friends and with his little brother, playing games and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's just who Ramarley was.
Frank?
You know, lately I've been thinking about, you know, I try to think of something, the happy moments. So I'm remembering, you know, when he was little boy, the things he used to like to do, a little smile, you know, the little birthday party, when he would try to dance, or just, you know, in the morning when he would wake up and he would just like run, come lay in front of me, and I just used to feel his warm body just laying in front of me, and I would cover him up. Even though sometimes I know he had to go to school, it's like, you know, I didn't want to let him go. He was a really fun, loving, very passionate and loving. You know, even at 18, he would still kiss me on the cheek and say, "I love you, Daddy." He's caring. He likes to just hang around with the little one, babysitting them, watching over them. Mm-hmm. The most sad part about it is not get to see him be what he wanted to be, because I knew he was going to be somebody special. You know, since he passed, like a lot of people that I met was telling me that they used to have just social conversation with him, and they couldn't believe he was just, you know, 17 or 16 at the time, because he used to speak like he's grown. You know, Ramarley kept a Bible in his pocket 24/7. He walked with his Bible, and at time when he was just sitting down, relaxing, he would take it out and read it. And if you can remember, we put that same Bible in his casket, you know. So he was just a really fun, loving. He got, you know, like that pretty smile, you know, like, you know, he was just like, as his brothers, they used to call him Daddy's boy. Yeah, Daddy's boy.
I remember you had made a statement that you had always told him, don't hang out on the street.
Yeah.
Go where you're going and go back home.
Yeah.
And don't hang out on the street.
Because, you know, my fear, you know, I'm not naive to the things that happen on the street. I know that we do have problems on the street with kids, you know, getting involved with other kids, fighting, and, you know, I didn't want to hear the wrong place at the wrong time. So I would say that to him. And I remember it was August of 2011 when me and him was having that conversation. And he said to me, Daddy, I'm not getting in no trouble. I'm not getting into no fight. I'm not arguing with nobody. And I was saying, you know, like telling him really how much I love him, and that I actually said, I can't live without you. Mm-hmm. I don't want nothing to happen to you. And he looked at me, I remember those eyes, and he said, Daddy, I'm not going to make you sad. Nothing is not going to happen to me. He said that.
We have a roll-in that we want to run at this time. Following the shooting, there were a number of things that were being presented by NYPD, but we want you to see some actual film footage, and we're going to go to that roll-in at this time. Please stand by, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
The surveillance video is dramatic and telling. At 3 p.m. Thursday, 18-year-old Ramarley Graham can be seen walking into his home on East 229th in the Bronx. The NYPD rushes in seconds later without a search warrant and try to gain entry.
And he's kicking the door because the door is locked. They came in with their gun drawn.
According to a resident who was inside during the forced entry,
they did not screen police.
And there is no sign of a search warrant. The surveillance video is high grade. Its clarity, that of a professional. Clearly, the officers are seen desperately trying to break into the house through the front door. The damage evident once we got our cameras inside. The video also shows the NYPD entering through the back and then unlocking the front door. Once in, the race upstairs to Graham is on. And moments later, boom, boom, is all Paulette Minzy heard. In her bathroom and barely dressed, she suddenly had a gun in her face. Minzy then put her hands up and screams,
I'm the landlord, I'm the landlord.
Minzy said the NYPD then searched her home. They found no gun. On the second floor, an unarmed Ramarley Graham was dead. After everything that's happened and the death of the young boy, how do you trust police?
I can't trust them. I'm scared of them. Right now I'm scared of my life because I don't know what they will do. Because, you know, I don't know what they do, and if they saw me, I'm so scared.
Do you think they're doing their job?
No, they're not. They're not doing their job. They're not doing their job. They're cruel. They're very cruel, and I'm scared of my life because the cops come and put the gun in my face. I'm so scared.
A judge throws out the indictment against police officer Richard Haste. He's the man who killed unarmed Bronx teen Ramarley Graham in his home last year. The decision infuriated Graham's parents. They spoke to our Brittany Miller just hours after the announcement. She has this interview that you'll only see on 12.
Justice and peace, two things the family of Ramarley Graham say were absent from the courtroom Wednesday morning when the indictment against Officer Richard Haste was tossed out and the charges dropped. A Bronx judge called instructions to the grand jury misleading, saying the Bronx DA's office was incorrect in telling the grand jury to disregard communication to Richard Haste that Ramarley may be armed.
The judge made a difficult decision here. There's no winners or losers in this case.
I don't care what the PBA might say, there's no winners here. I would love to have my son. So we are definitely the losers.
In an exclusive sit-down with Ramarley's parents, Frank Graham and Constance Malcolm, the pair dished the details of what was running through their minds when they heard the judge's decision, especially Malcolm.
And I felt that I had to make him see my pain, show him what he did to my family and what he did to me.
I don't care what my child. What more can you do to me? What more can you do to me?
What more can you do to me? You already took my child. Lock me up ain't gonna do anything for me. So you do what you want to do, because I'm a mom and I'm going to continue to fight, because the fight that's over here, it don't stop here, it's going to continue.
Meanwhile, the Bronx DA's office was told it could represent the case to a grand jury, a move Graham doesn't want the DA to make.
I don't know if anyone in that office will try this case properly, because the DA worked closely with the NYPD, and it's like they're buddies. So how can I trust them to send their buddies to prison?
Both Frank and Constance say they understand the dismissal of the charges doesn't mean the case is completely over. In fact, they say this is just the beginning.
We are going to get justice. We are going to shut the city down.
And the Graham family says they will continue to fight. They plan on holding a rally right here in front of their house on East 229th Street at 1 p.m. on Saturday.
Now that was file footage, so don't go there Saturday. That's file footage. The courtroom. You said there's nothing they can really do to you.
Yeah.
When did you both lose faith in this system?
That day, after that judge made that decision. Because at first I really didn't understand, because it was like jumbled. He kept on going on, and I think nobody in the court really understand what he was really saying. And then I'm looking, I'm like, this doesn't sound right at all. And I just went back to the first day of the court when Richard Hayes was arraigned, and he came out of court laughing, and his buddies out there applauding. And I'm like, oh my God, he's going to walk again, and he's going to be laughing at, at us. So, like Frank said, when the PBA said there's no winner or loser, we are the loser, because he's walking home, and our son laying up in a cemetery. We never want to see our son. He might not have any kids now, but eventually maybe he will have kids, and he will have his child, a girl or a boy, I don't, whatever he might have, he have that child. And I birthed 3 children, and I only left for 2. So at that point, I was just furious. I'm like, this man is going to walk again. I couldn't believe what was going on. It's like the flashback just came, and I just reacted. And when I told the judge, what more can you really do? What more can you do to me? You took my son. What more can you lock me up? I'm going to come out and I'm going to continue fighting. That's what a mom do. They continue to fight for their child, and that's what I'm doing.
I want to move to the legal expert. Jeff, can you explain to us, again, with the first indictment, the reasoning for the judge to dismiss that and have them represent the grand jury?
In simplistic terms, there's something called the fellow officer rule, which means essentially that an officer is allowed to rely on the communication of another fellow officer, whether that communication was correct or incorrect, because that officer is not always present to see what the other officer saw. So that basically affects that officer who's the recipient of the information, his state of mind. So when the district attorney charged the grand jury, according to the judge, he did not properly charge them as to the state of mind of the officer, in that he was allowed to consider the communications that he had received prior to entering the premises and before discharging his weapon. Now that presupposes, by the way, we have no proof whatsoever that there was any communication from one point to the next point. That is something that could be concocted. Did I just lose this? Yeah. That's something that could have been concocted after the fact to justify the shooting, and we'll never know that because those transmissions were never recorded, so their existence themselves are even in question.
But this incident started 4.5 blocks from the home. They said they observed him down on 225th Street and followed him and his friends up White Plains Road. And my question is, they believe they saw a gun. Believe. Now, it's wintertime. People wearing layers of clothing. And even if you believe you saw a gun, and I've done gun stops in New York, I've done many of them. Some people were legitimately carrying, they were FBI agents and such, and others were not licensed to carry. But I didn't allow a person to travel 4 and 5 blocks before stopping them if I assumed that they had a weapon.
And this story doesn't make much sense. You know, interestingly enough, Graham, Commissioner Kelly met with us after this incident, and that was one of the issues that we raised. And the story that we were told at that particular time was that there was a particular bodega that was under surveillance for narcotics transactions. That the officers in the observing team in a vehicle, he didn't specify how the distance this vehicle was from the store and whether or not they were using binoculars. But they said that they observed Ramarley and his 2 friends emerge from the store. They didn't observe any narcotics transactions, and interestingly enough, the 2 friends and Ramarley, 2 friends were never charged with possessing narcotics, and their whole predicate for running after Ramarley, and Ramarley was not running away,
no, he wasn't.
Was not based on narcotics whatsoever. So they claimed that they saw Ramarley adjusting the waist of his pants. Ramarley wore baggy pants, which was in style. Many youths in this area and in the city wear baggy pants. They claimed that they witnessed the butt of a gun. Commissioner Kelly gave us no further detail. Didn't tell us what the gun looked like, what color it was, where it was on Ramarley's person, nothing. The observing team then radioed the transmission to the backup team. They had all those blocks to stop those 3 young men, to pat them down, to inquire, to do anything. Nothing of the sort was done. Now, after the fact, Commissioner Kelly had this explanation, and he said, well, the team that received that radio communication was moving in, and another car came down the block, and they made visual confirmation that Ramarley had a gun while he was crossing the street. Now, I don't know how often the NYPD checks their employees' eyes, or what their training is, or how so many people can be so certain and be so wrong, or whether they're all certain about one thing, that we better get our stories together and cover this thing up, because we screwed up. Because contrary to police spokesman Brown's statement, Ramarley was never running away from anybody. It's evident on the tape that you just played. He never possessed anything in his waistband. There's nothing visible on the tape that we saw. No narcotics was ever found on the 2 people that Ramarley was with. No gun was found on his person, in his premises, or in the building. And believe you me, they spent 48 hours up and down. He even went upstairs to the landlord's apartment and searched her apartment on that day without a warrant as well.
Without a warrant.
So there were many constitutional violations that were breached that unfortunate day. And now we are calling on the United States Department of Justice to take over this case and finally bring this family some peace.
The notion, or the fact that this case was summarily thrown out of court, the grand jury presentation, I'd like you to go to the grand jury and explain to the people about the grand jury, because it has been said that you can indict a ham sandwich in New York. The Bronx District Attorney's Office, which hands down thousands of indictments every year, cannot make a proper presentation to a grand jury, and summarily that case is dismissed, it's represented, and that is thrown out. What is the role of the district attorney with regard to the grand jury and his presentation in the grand jury?
The prosecutor serves as a legal advisor in the grand jury. Once the indictment is secured, he then takes more on the role as a prosecutor. So in the grand jury itself, it's almost as if he's standing in the stead of a judge. So he has to make sure that the evidence presented is presented fairly and that the grand jurors themselves receive the proper interpretation of the law. Now, I'm not so sure that the first time around that they presented it erroneously. Justice Barrett thought that they did, and that's all that matters. And he basically did it based on one word, an or as opposed to and. And we had every confidence that they presented it the first time and got an indictment. The facts didn't change. The evidence didn't change. How could they not get the indictment the second time around? We're all stunned, to be quite honest with you. We really are stunned.
And the grand jury is a secret panel.
Right.
Do you get copies of the grand jury minutes subsequent to this incident?
No, we do not.
So you can't compare the first grand jury presentation to the second?
No.
Is the DA allowed to omit information in his presentation to the grand jury?
He can be selective in what evidence he chooses to submit to the grand jury, but he can't purposely withhold evidence that goes to the innocence of an accused, because then he's committing misconduct. But with respect to presenting the case, some prosecutors present a full case. Some say, I'm going to hold back some evidence and save it for the trial. We don't know which road the prosecutor's office took in this case. We do know one thing, and Frank and Connie will tell you, from the very beginning we called for a special prosecutor. From day one, we asked the United States Department of Justice to take this case, and we understood that it had to go wind its way through the state system first before they'll review it. But when that failed, we asked for a special prosecutor because we didn't have confidence that this matter was going to be handled properly.
What would be the benefit of a special prosecutor as compared to utilizing the DA?
We felt that if there was a special prosecutor that was involved and detached from local politics, the local precincts, any internal pressures, and that somebody that had experience with these kind of cases and would have had a team with him that was just focused on this case, as opposed to focusing on their normal caseload plus this case. We felt more confident in somebody that would bring that kind of force to bear.
I received a phone call from D.A. Johnson early this year regarding some comments that I had made about his office. And he said to me, did you make these comments at this particular meeting? I said, no, I wasn't at that meeting. I was not present. I said, but I have made the comments. And he and I met at ABC Studios when we were taping Like It Is with Gil Noble following the shooting of Amadou Diallo. And I said I wasn't going to berate him on national television. But the way he was running his office then, it was an indication that the people in his office were making decisions over and against him. Or he and his subordinates were on the same page. And the reason why I say that is because I have a very dear friend who was with the U.S. Attorney's Office and was there in the Bronx DA's office with the feds monitoring this case. And he called me and told me and said, they don't want to prosecute a cop. Nobody wants to handle this case. So instead of your sharpest and elite prosecutors handling a case, you wind up with whomever. And that was the reality of it, and I have no reason to doubt my close friend. So I told G.A. Johnson, yeah, I've made statements. And this subsequent case substantiates the statements that I made over 10 years ago. Because there's no way in the world that you can get an indictment and then come back and not get an indictment on the same case.
I've actually never heard of it before, to be honest with you. If it happens, it's extremely rare. But there was one thing I did leave out as to why we wanted a special prosecutor. Mm-hmm. The night that this happened, Constance's mother was in the apartment with her grandson and Ramarley's brother. And Patsy, we call her Patsy, she was taken into police custody. And for 7 hours, she was kept isolated from her daughter, from her family. She was refused to leave. She wanted to leave. She wasn't allowed to grieve. She didn't even know what was going on other than her grandson was shot and killed. And I arrived at the precinct. We all were there, members of the community. Eric Stevenson even came down. And we demanded to see Patricia, Patsy. And I demanded it as her attorney. And when we were given the runaround for a good hour and a half to 2 hours, I'd say, right? Yeah. And during that time, Patricia was kept isolated. She was questioned. She was distraught. And we had come to learn that 2 of the people that were questioning her were the very same people that were assigned to the case to prosecute these officers.
What?
It's all true. So we had absolutely no confidence in what was going on. We were behind the scenes in the DA's office. And we've had meetings. We had multiple meetings with the district attorney's office. Robert Johnson did keep his door open, and he did speak to us, but it didn't effectuate change. The same people were still assigned to the case. No special prosecutor was ever inquired. And their concerns were never alleviated. And as you can imagine, Patsy, who was one of the primary witnesses in this case, felt terribly intimidated and uncomfortable every time she saw the very prosecutors that were assigned to present her testimony. It was not a very favorable set of events.
We wonder why people are skeptical of the system and why they won't cooperate time and time again, and this is a good reason why. Deputy Commissioner DCPI Brown, who is who's in charge of public information, they put out a video of an alleged Ramarley running down the street to justify the fact that these officers were in pursuit. And it turned out that the video that they were showing was of another person wearing different color clothing. He had on, I remember he had on a white top, right, and Ramarley was not wearing light clothing. And when the video came out from the home, from your home, they had to pull back from that.
The man was running in the wrong direction too.
Yes. As well. And what the police department routinely does, they want to poison the jury pool, have someone believe, oh, this person was arrested, this person did that. No information on the officer, but everything about the victim. So you're damning the victim. Now, when you come into a jury situation, people have preconceived notions of your son or any other defendant or victim, and the justification is that the police officers were acting properly. Were it not for the video that your landlord had, this case would have been shut down a long time ago, yes, and totally discarded with the junk that Deputy Commissioner Brown was putting forth. And it's interesting that in the NYPD patrol guide, it says that an officer or a member is not to lie during an investigation because it is grounds for termination. But the one individual who continually lies and presents misleading information are the deputy commissioners of public information. They lie to the public, they lie to the press, they seek to protect the image. And this is a problem I've had with NYPD for years. They will not apologize when they messed up. No one is perfect. But when you messed up, when you were wrong, admit that you were wrong. And it helps people to move forward from that juncture. We have another clip that we want to show. Okay. This one, I believe, is in your apartment, because I want the people to see just how much space there was, how much room there was. When you talk about the information and belief of the officer that he received from another officer in responding, well, only one officer could stand in that doorway of the bathroom, and you're going to see it now. We'll go to that roll in, please.
So if he's throwing something in the toilet, I'm throwing something in the toilet. I'm not threatening you. That's what you're man. What are you doing? That's about nobody wants anybody. Molly, the first one who made Molly up. So when I come and see blood out, I'm not telling about port blood. I tell them, we cannot come and receive the map this. That's going to wash it out. One of ears are full of blood. And when I look at blood was in there, I said, wait, all the blood all over in the bag. She don't even want to use in here. Just come in here and steal. Now, when the police broke through the door, running in that from that here. Right, they broke through the door there. Where were you? Oh, in there. Sorry. I'm getting. Why shoot him? What him do? Okay, so when they kicked in the door, you were coming up. Coming from where? Coming from right here. You're coming from here. Okay. I'm back time I reach here, so they're running. And Ramarley is already in the bathroom. I don't know what was it, sir, unless it was dry, the bathroom was drying out. God, it was right, more close to the bathroom. Okay. Because they say him get sexual, I don't know. When I hear poor, you see him drop. It's not only an employee, it get shot in the shoulder. And they never tell me nothing. They come here now, I get him off, shot his foot and all, so I don't know. Shoulder, foot, or heart, mash up something like that. No, we have a report, there's only one gunshot. Alright, you're in there, he's over here somewhere. Well, you really didn't see him, so they might have seen him before you got up in this direction. Okay. Alright, these are 18 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 feet. Okay. So it's 9 feet from that door jams to this door jams. Yeah, hold on, okay, you said he was face down. Yes, face down. I have to see the entry wound. I'm going to examine the body. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, there's a lot of background noise, but I was talking with your mother.
Yeah.
She was present when the shooting took place. When the police officers kicked in the door with no warrant, because they were not in immediate pursuit, and that's another thing about the video. We have video front and back of the house, because it took them about 5 minutes before they entered the house. And I want to go to this in the legal sense. The neighbor on the first floor, who sent his little boy to open the door and then was standing in the cold, and the father went to see what was going on. They asked him about the kid that lived in the building, the tall kid, the dark-skinned kid. He said, "Oh, Ramarley, he lives upstairs." And they asked him if they could come in. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they came into his apartment.
Yeah, but it wasn't a request. This was at gunpoint. They had their guns out. The little 8-year-old boy answered the door, scared out of his mind. His father came in, came to the back. There was no choice to letting him in.
Oh, so they didn't ask?
Oh, no. No, there were multiple constitutional violations that occurred, including the people on the first floors. Their rights were violated as well.
So, and technically, even if he had allowed them into his apartment.
That's into his apartment.
Right. He could not give permission for them to go through the building because he's not the owner of the building, correct?
His mother's the owner of the building on the third, stepmom on the third floor. The point is, and you brought it up a moment ago, there's two areas. There's hot pursuit and exigent circumstances.
Right.
A hot pursuit exception is if I see a crime, I believe he has a crime, I observe a crime being committed, and you running away from me, and I'm in pursuit, and I go inside an apartment, I close the door, a police officer can pursue after. Okay. Then there's another issue that's called exigent circumstance. Somebody runs into an apartment, you're in office, you don't know what's going on, but you're hearing somebody say, "Help, help me," or like, "I'm being held hostage," or you're getting a call that somebody's being held hostage, that there's an emergency, then you're allowed to take some action. Or you want to prevent against the destruction of evidence. None of these exceptions were present in this case. First of all, Ramarley was calmly walking. They had no reason to believe that he committed a crime. He didn't have probable cause. Maybe they had reason at best to stop and inquire, but they didn't even exercise that right within 4+ blocks of his walking. There was no exigent circumstances. No one was yelling out for help. A gun can't be flushed down a toilet or destroyed as evidence, and the place was surrounded by police officers. No one could come in, no one could leave. You could surround the premises and go and petition the court for a warrant, but they didn't do that, because no judge would have issued a warrant under the circumstances. It's really clear. It's a very clear case.
Procedurally, they're not in line. What they did was not in line with NYPD procedures. You don't, even if you believe somebody had a gun, you don't chase them into a building. You don't even know the layout of the building.
Or who's inside it.
Right, and you put yourself at risk going into an edifice and you have no idea what's going on. That's why they should have maintained a perimeter around the building and then do the legal steps in order to get in. We have a caller on the line. We're going to take a call at this time. Yes, go ahead, please.
Hotep.
Hotep. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hotep, I want to give my regards. How are you, sir? I'm Mr. Witherspoon. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'll be really quick. First, I want to say I think that's amazing what you guys did with the record of that documentation of the scene going into the house, because if that was seen in the beginning, I think people will have a whole different take. Sort of like even if some cameras were on a scene with Alberta Sproul on May 16th, 2003, Sean Bell, and I know, it's discrepancy with the cops and the law enforcement, but what you just did was amazing. I couldn't really hear in the background. There's a lot of going on, but I did see a beautiful, clean home, a nice home. If that was seen, I think that would have been really relevant. And I'm so sorry what has happened to your son, ma'am, Mr. Graham, my brother, your son. I can't imagine what you're going through, and but your entire family, and to the attorney, you're amazing, and all you guys putting your lives on the front line. But he is in transition. He is still with us, and he is one of our ancestors, and he is going to guide us to justice. My question to you is, do you believe this was a targeted killing? And I ask that question because this white supremacist campaign that Doomberg has had for the last 12 years, it has gotten really bad under his administration. So, and unlike anything I have ever seen in this city before, was this a targeted killing? I love you. Be well, and I'll hang up and answer for your call. Are you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
A targeted killing.
I would have to say that to the extent that Ramarley was targeted based upon the color of his skin and his age and the community that he was in, I believe he was targeted for those things. I don't know or believe that at the outset they set out to kill this young man out of all the people that live in the city. But I do believe that he was targeted for constitutional rights violations. I believe that he was going to be illegally seized, illegally searched. I think that he was targeted based on the clothing that he was wearing, who he was with, and for no other reasons like that. And then I believe, taking it a step further, I believe that these officers were cowboys, that they were not properly trained. They didn't follow proper procedure. You saw the weapons in their hand, and they were going to get their guy by hook or crook, by lie, deception, shortcut, whatever way you want to call it. They were out to get Ramarley Graham. And the first officer in was Officer Haste, who had not even completed his training for the very unit that he was assigned to. There should have been what's called an emergency service unit that should have been present on a gun. These were not even officers from a weapons unit. These were narcotics officers. So there are so many holes in their story that I could see where the community thinks that it's perhaps what he was targeted for a killing. You know, we all have to hope and pray that that's not the case.
You know, we just had the federal judge come down with the decision with regard to stop and frisk here in New York City, and now the mayor wants to waste taxpayers' money in appealing this measure. But before we come to that, we have another caller. We want to take you, and then we'll come back to this issue of stop, question, and frisk. Yes, you're on the line, please. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Graham? This is Nat Wood.
How you doing?
I just wanna say I really, really, really appreciate the job that you and Winston are doing on this show. I'd like to say give my best to Constance Malcolm and her family, and urge all producers of radio, television, in every single borough, every opportunity to get behind this sister, get behind this family, because what happened to them was a disgrace. I have one question for you as someone who knows police procedure. Is it customary for a policeman in any kind of pursuit, whether it's hot pursuit or not, to, if he fears that there's a gun on location, to turn his back to the door and kick the door from behind? That seems reckless, especially if you honestly believe that someone is behind that door and has the capability to return fire. And I'm going to hang up and see the last portion of the show to you. But again, my very, very best wishes to the Graham family. And thank you, brother. You and Winston did a really good thing putting these people on the show.
Thank you, Nat. Nat is one of the staff people here at I was going to say CNN, MNN. Thank you, Nat. Tactically, very reckless. Banging on a door like that, you can get shot through the door, obviously. And the breaching a door is something, again, you call emergency service for. I've executed no-knock search warrants, knocking in the door, going in and getting the people and the guns we had to get. And you don't do it without calling those specialized units. You put yourself in jeopardy. And tactically it's wrong, procedurally it's definitely wrong. And I'd like to know who the supervisor was, if they had a supervisor on the scene. Because there was a supervisor on the scene when Sean Bell was shot, and he was hiding in the car while the bullets were blazing. The notion, and you saw it on the video, you saw them run up to the door, and they're coming from an opposite direction. Ramarley's coming from the west, and they're coming from the east. But for them to tactically, for that officer to do something like that, it was foolish and reckless, definitely.
Not only for themselves, for their own safety, they didn't have the layout of the interior of the apartment. They didn't know who was present. There was a 6-year-old little boy that was present. You could have run in and tripped on something, a gun could have gone off. You could have friendly fire. There would be a guy behind you with a weapon. You know, normally when you execute a no-knock, everybody there's a tactical plan, and everybody has an assignment. You go in first, we'll take this corner, that. There was nothing. This guy just came in and ran down the hall, right down to the bathroom, and shot Ramarley right in the bathroom. And his explanation was that he thought that he was reaching for a weapon. He appeared to be reaching for a weapon, and he ignored all his commands to show me your hands, show me your hands, show me your hands. First of all, there was no time to have given those commands. No. Nobody heard those commands. And why would you be reaching for something that you don't possess?
You know, it's interesting, as you saw in the video, I was standing in the doorway of the bathroom. That hallway is narrow. I can stand abreast and maybe not quite half of me to my left. It's not a wide hallway. No. The entrance to the bathroom, only one person can stand there. Ramarley, and forgive me, but Ramarley was struck just below the left collarbone. And the bullet traversed diagonally through to his lower right back. He was not standing up when he was shot. He had to have been bending down when Haste fired the shot, because Haste fired downward, striking Ramarley. And his grandmother said he fell face down with his head near the commode. She had come down the hall. His little brother said, "You shot my brother." All of this. And one of the problems with the people in NYPD, they get the legal training. They can't say they didn't get it. They can't say they didn't know that I couldn't go in. They know it. They have legal training. They are taught that.
And they get interim legal bulletins.
And they get legal bulletins. But the attitude is, number one, you have what's called selective enforcement. What they do in our communities, they don't do in your community.
Mine? What's my community?
Or the communities where the people look like you. I don't know where you live. But they will not summarily kick in a door in a white neighborhood on a matter such as this. They would have done it by the book, because they know there would be legal ramifications behind that. And the attitude is that it doesn't make any difference how we disrespect the people, how we violate their rights, because the mayor and the commissioner have our back. And apparently the DAs have our back.
You know, ask Frank this. Frank was sitting next to me when we met with Commissioner Kelly, and I remember him looking at me and shaking his head, and I said to Commissioner Kelly, "Commissioner Kelly, somebody gave a statement saying that Ramarley was running from the police, and your office repeated that to the press, and your office repeated to the press that there was a struggle inside the apartment. We withheld that tape until you got your statements out, and then we disclosed it, and then you backtracked on it. Now what are you doing to find the source of that information? Who is conveying this misinformation to the public and filing false statements in a police investigation? What are you going to do about that?" What do you say? I'm going to look into it. I don't know.
Yes, exactly.
We haven't heard anything. It's a year later.
Yeah.
Nothing. And you ask why they don't have confidence in the system.
Years ago, we have a caller, we're going to get to you in 1 minute. The people that trained us were really professionals. My partner and I worked in plainclothes units all my career, but when I worked in anti-crime, there were people we followed from the Lower East Side, through the subways to Harlem, up to Yankee Stadium, and back down to Midtown before we arrested them. We followed guys for 2 and 3 hours, clocking their every move before we arrested them. It's a big rush now to make an arrest. And one of the things they really have to do when you get a new DA in the Bronx and we get a new commissioner in this city next year, years ago, a police officer had to list his court appearances on the back of the arrest report. In the transit police, if you arrested somebody and that case was thrown out, you had to write a report to the chief of the department as to why the case was thrown out. We need to look at the cases that are summarily thrown out of court by the district attorney in the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, and Brooklyn, and see how many times a police officer effects an arrest and that arrest results in the person being released, or it's called a 343 where the DA doesn't even want to prosecute it and declines to prosecute the case. When you instill that in the system, you will have police officers backing off of these arrests because they were being monitored years ago. And I know police officers that went to prison for making false arrests of people. One was the niece of an inspector of NYPD, but you don't have that anymore. There is no accountability and there's very little integrity. We have a caller on the line. Please, go ahead. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, you're on.
Hello?
We hear you. Turn
Hello,
down your television, please. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right, we need to hear from you.
Okay. I just want to make a comment.
Yes.
You mentioned that there's no integrity that's in our system any longer, and the way things used to be, it no longer exists today. And it's not just in New York City, but it's across the board. What used to be considered normal, abnormal, is now being looked at as normal. Normalcy is no longer in existence. There's a power that is overseeing, not just here in New York City, but over all of the states. A power that is so strong, it's not just in the police department, but it's in every facet of law enforcement, the senators. We're sitting back and we're looking at our country changing. We're being put under surveillance. And you have to look at it's an evil force. We cannot get away from that. This is an evil force. Laws were put in order to keep balance. All of that is leaving. So you have to say to yourself, people are afraid to speak out. The reason why they are so powerful is because they pay homage to what they believe in. They believe in evilness, so that's what empowers them. We are powerless because we do not submit ourselves to where our power comes from, which is God Almighty. And it's going to get worse. And what we're going to do, continue to sit back and just watch how things used to be as opposed to the way things are now? We need to, if we want to survive, get on our knees and pray to Almighty God, because that is where our power comes from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And when you get off your knees, you got to do something. The philosopher Burke said, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. St. Paul said that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and evil and darkness in high levels. So what this woman has put forth is very true. We have another caller on the line. We want to get you in before the end of the show. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, you're on.
Hey, okay. Yeah, I just want to say, I would be real brief. And I also want to say, to the attorney, and this is with no much respect to you, we need more attorneys like Automatics, people who fight like us, people who fight for us, black people who look like us. So how do we know you're not on the take? How do we know you didn't throw this case? How do we know you're not paid? You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is what goes on. A lot of what that lady said is true. There's so many levels of deception in every realm. It's interesting how the Tom Martin, the Ramarley Graham, the Sean Bell, all these cases are getting thrown. Also, there's always these attorneys that are always with their hush-hush statements that they don't get nothing done. Answer me one question: why aren't there any attorneys willing to die for their cases anymore? How come this case was thrown, and how do we know you're not on the tape? Thank you.
So if my color of my skin was different, then you would feel more confident that I'm not on the take. I guess that's a problem that I just can't address, sir, and I'm sorry that you feel that way, and I'm sure that you have every reason to feel that way. All I can say to you is that we do our best, and we effectuate change in the results, and I'm glad I have the confidence of my clients.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. See, when we got Indem and Russell, Jeff Indem involved in this case, I've seen, I've been to many rallies before for Sean and for Amadou Diallo. And meanwhile, I was privy to the inside work of the attorneys. But I know one thing: everything that we have asked them to do, they have done it above and beyond. They have come to rallies with us, meeting with us. I mean, they have done everything. To be honest, the bigger attorneys, I don't know if they would have did some of the things that these guys did. I mean, we have them walking 2 miles a day with us. Most people just sit in their office and call and everything's okay. They were actually on the ground with us. They came to the house, they sat down with us.
Very true.
So I understand what the gentleman is saying, but I truly believe in this case, our attorney are really here for us.
All right, we have run out of time. I can name well-known black attorneys who have been disbarred in New York City. I can name them, but I'm not going to name them. They've been disbarred. It's not about the color of the skin, it's about the content of the character, as Martin said. All right, let's try and remember that. There's good and bad in everything. We have to say goodbye. See you next week.
I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, "To be or not to be." He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
Malcolm was always involved somewhere in the struggle.
Get uptown.